Well, this is a special one for me. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. I got Brent Tucker from First Responder Coffee and Cigar Company, also co-host of the Antihero Podcast. Brent, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. Been looking forward to this.
That makes me happy to hear. I'm grateful for that. Also grateful for a couple of other things.
Well, I'm surprised it took us a year because we were talking about it last year at SHOT Show when we had breakfast.
Yes. So first off, you were kind enough to sit down and have breakfast with us and just chat. And that was kind of when things were really getting rolling with Antihero.
Yeah.
I had questions for you. We kind of got put together last minute by our good buddy Chris Blau.
Yeah. He was the last booth I went to before coming here. Was to go say hi to Chris.
One of the sweetest dudes in the industry,
sure.
Man. I love him. He's a very dear friend. So shout out to Chris Blau from 1911 Syndicate.
He's too large to be that sweet.
He's like a Sasquatch, dude. I know. You look at that guy coming down the hallway, or like you get off the sidewalk and over the side. He's also the guy that would just smother you with hugs.
Yeah. The only way he's going to hurt you is if he hugs you too hard.
Yeah, it's exactly right.
Which is a possibility.
He's definitely capable. There's capability there for sure. I would not want to see Chris in an upset mood.
I'm sure he's got a switch that I wouldn't want to see.
We all do. We all do. It's just how far you got to push somebody.
That's right.
Yeah, so we sat down a year ago at SHOT Show. I actually got to connect with you again at TTPOA.
That's right.
You guys were out there supporting the Tactical Police Officers Association down there in Texas, which was a really great conference and a really great experience for me.
That is a good one.
And we got to talk about a few things. I had, at that point, a few more podcasts had been released, and there was certainly an uptick going on with the things that you were doing, and I was watching the show evolve.
Yeah.
So anyway, like all that said, man, I'm grateful to have you here. And thanks for taking time out of your busy day.
Happy to do it. Long overdue.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks, I'll give a shout out to Vanessa, who is the back end of kind of the marketing side of things, who seems amazing. I'm a little disappointed she's not up here right now, if I'm being honest. I'm going to say that publicly. I wanted to thank her for doing all the schedule switching and stuff for us.
She should. She wouldn't take up much space. She's a little pocket assistant. But I couldn't be more grateful for her. She keeps you on schedule. She doesn't let me miss anything. I agree to too many things, which sounds great until you miss something, and then you're the dick. And she keeps me on schedule and lets me know what's next. And it couldn't be any more grateful for that.
I think she's also a huge fan of you for sure. That everybody needs a handler in their life when you're starting to do this. So. Yeah. Brent's got a handler. Thanks, Vanessa, for handling Brent for the situation. Also grateful that I haven't written a biography, and that my last name doesn't rhyme with melody. So we're gonna kick this off. I just want to handle this for a couple of minutes, and we'll move on, because I'm sure you're getting a lot of questions, and there was a recent episode, and I'm curious just on I have a few questions about it. It's gone like wildfire. And I actually asked you about this when I saw you at TTPOA, because at that point, the Marcus Luttrell episode had happened.
Right.
I believe the Rob O'Neill episode had happened at that point.
Yes. That was early on.
It had already happened. And I think for me, when those episodes were coming out, well, let me just back up a little bit, actually, because question, was it always the Antihero Podcast, or was it called something else first?
No, it was always the Antihero Podcast.
Okay.
I didn't come on, I think, to episode 47.
Okay.
My co-host, Tyler, he started it, from the name, the logo, from episode 1. He saw me on a news interview, or maybe he saw me on another podcast, and he saw that I was local, and he just sent me a random email and said, "Hey, I got a really small podcast, but I'm a first responder. Mm-hmm. Would love it if you'd come on." And of course, with my company, I was like, "Of course, I don't care how small your podcast is. I'm a support first responders." And I went on his podcast. So I was a guest once. Then I was a guest again. And then eventually he came up to me and was like, "Hey, I'd love to do this. Would you be interested in doing this?" Which I always was, but I never thought I would do a podcast because I was already really stretched thin then. And I understood the amount of time like editing would take, and recording, and finding guests, and doing all that. And I wanted to talk about first responder stories. And a part of me wanted to talk about like cop shooting. Mm-hmm. Kind of like that AER, look at videos, breakdown.
Sure.
But I never wanted to do that because I think it'd look bad having a special operations guy be perceived that, oh, it's just a special operations guy telling a cop how he should have done his work, which would not be the intent. The intent was like, hey, this is what happened. He made the best decisions he made in split second, but how could it be better for the next time? And by having a co-host that's law enforcement, it worked out perfectly. He was like, all right, I'll already do the editing. You just show up. We'll help take care of the guests together and everything. I was like, this is perfect. So it was a perfect scenario for me. If it wasn't this, then I wouldn't be doing a podcast.
It's interesting how it's evolved. I definitely want to talk about that and get into a few things on that for sure, like on the business end and the back end and the things that you guys are doing. It's been really impressive to see the rise. And yes, there's been some episodes, obviously, that get a little bit more attention maybe than others and for different reasons. The one previously mentioned on Tim Kennedy was obviously a big one for you. And, it's interesting, like, when you do that stuff and you have a kind of attention that grabs and all the different ways that it grabs it, the positivity that comes out of it and then also the negativity that comes out of it. So I have questions about that and just kind of how you're handling that.
Yeah.
But again, going back, we had sat down, or we're standing there in front of your booth, and I was kind of asking you about some things, and I had asked you at that point. I said, "So when are you going to do the one on Tim Kennedy?" Right, and it hadn't been. I mean, I think you guys had made a few comments about a few things, in the on the podcast, or maybe a clip or two on that.
And it was real small teasers.
Correct. And so I knew you were kind of. Obviously, it already grabbed some attention, but I had just kind of finished reading that book. And I had some personal thoughts on it. And I'd actually been in some similar places, and I don't want to get into the detail of that. At the same time, he said he was in some similar places. So to be clear for people that, are listening to this for the first time, I have 0 military experience, and I have 0 law enforcement experience. The podcast does, on the podcast, I talk to a lot of people, obviously, in that genre, in those genres, because that was the impetus for the training that I was doing and the information that I was trying to gather. And so, that said, I don't have any experiential things to bring to any of this, but I was curious. And when I read that book, I had questions. I had a lot of questions. I go, man, this is crazy.
Right.
And for a lot of the reasons you guys have already noted. But at that time I said, so when are you doing? And you said, we're working on it.
Yeah.
That was in like April of last year. Yeah. And that episode finally dropped. What is it? Was it the beginning of December? Yeah, December.
Yeah. It was a task.
So that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about that task, but also just the work that went into that. And so as I was watching things, and I got to be honest, so Antihero was on my radar for quite some time, and I'd seen it, and then it just started to pick up steam, and then I hadn't listened, but I'd seen it on Instagram, and I was following and kind of whatnot. And then I started getting into the podcast, and you guys started to get a little bit more refined, right? We can talk about that refinement process. But the research that was going into things and the people you were talking to and how they were coming out to talk about it, I found fascinating. Because at that point, I had a lot of questions about a lot of things, like, again, about that book, about other stories, movies, things that had come out. And I also have a lot of friends that have been in special operations or are police officers, but particularly in this particular instance, special operations. And I've sort of become very familiar with how divided the community is. Yes. And I wasn't really sure where it was going, the Antihero podcast and what's going on here, like what's the angle that these guys are trying to take. And I think a lot of people had apprehension about that. Like, well, these guys just trying to build, something and make a bunch of money doing it or whatever, like a lot of other podcasts had done with guys with similar backgrounds. And I say all that to say, what I recognized over time is it was very consistent. To me, it sounded very genuine. It's two dudes talking, but it's two dudes talking that are coming at it with definitely a different perspective, but also it wasn't an angle, it was more of an intention. So I want to talk a little bit about that. We can talk a little bit about that particular podcast, but what's the intention? What is the Antihero podcast about? How does it relate to FRCC? And what's the gel that's bringing all that together, man?
So I'll back. We'll go from big to small as you look over our library of work. People want to talk about the Rob O'Neills, the Marcus Luttrells, and the Tim Kennedys, episodes because they did grab the most traction. But we're on 110 episodes. over 100 of those episodes is veterans telling their stories, special ops guys telling their stories, firefighters, police, or our own like history episodes. Mm-hmm. They're all positive stories, giving people a platform to hear those stories. So it's a little bit of a misnomer to say like that is it's what we're known for. Hate to say it, I mean, it's what we're known for. And it's part of the least, and it is the least about what we do. So I mean, there's some irony there, but we understand that's the world we live in. That's the world we live in, man. Yeah. They don't want to hear about the positive stories,
Nope, they want to hear the drama, man.
Yeah, they're here for the drama.
It's downloaded somewhere deep in our DNA or motherboard of how people, take in content and think about stuff.
And I'll give you a little bit of history on the Rob O'Neill episode. We never intended on exposing anyone. Like that was never even something like, hey, this is something we should do. That happened by inserting my foot into my mouth on one of our podcasts. That podcast was about a first responder. That was the third person on the show, a guest. And she turned to me towards the end of the show and was like, hey, did Rob O'Neill really shoot Osama bin Laden? Just the most. I was like, and I answered it like team room answer. And I was like, no, he didn't shoot us. He didn't do that. It's the worst kept secret in all of special operations. I said, but that's the SEALs should. I wish the SEALs would come out and say something about it. But the truth is, they're probably too professional, and they got other things to do than to call him out. And that was the end of it. Tyler, my co-host, actually this is like one episode before I'm actually a co-host. I'm just on there as like a special guest.
Gotcha.
My phone blows up the next day because he creates a short that says Delta Force calls out Rob O'Neill, and it just goes everywhere throughout the special operations community. And I was not aware he was going to do that. That one caught me off guard. And then at that point, I get a lot of hate also, being like, hey, you just called a man a liar and you gave no reasons, no backup. Like that's a really,
that's a pretty solid accusation, or a pretty stiff accusation.
Yeah. And at that point, I won't go into some things that happen at a personal level when, between me and Rob, but it was, that interaction was less than professional. And I was like, all right, well, then I guess I need to do the right,
put your money where your mouth is.
Put my money where my mouth is. And so that's how that even started. But the Tim Kennedy thing kind of happened very similar because I was on a podcast talking about the withdrawal of Afghanistan. And we had someone there from a nonprofit that was doing the work. And I'd mentioned, because I just saw this before he came on, and it showed where Tim Kennedy said that he had saved his words that he said over and over again on every major podcast, that me and 3 other guys on the ground, 4 people, in 10 days rescued 12,000 people. I just thought to myself, that's impressive. Mm-hmm. Then I started thinking, that's 1,200 people a day with 4 dudes. Let me crunch some numbers. Like, how many people do you have to save every hour if you ran 24-hour ops? It's
an interesting math problem.
And I'm like, that's assuming your first day is just as productive as your last day. Mm-hmm. And the only thing I said was, I have questions. That's a legitimate thing. I have questions. And Tim Kennedy was not happy that anyone would dare question him. And like Rob, he had posted some things on our social media that were less than ideal to me. And so I said, all right, well, I guess I got someone.
We're going down this road.
Yeah, so we're going to go down this road. And it started on the evacuation, but as I kept pulling that string, as you know, our episode wasn't about the evacuation. It was about his second tour. He only has 2 tours of combat. And I know that's going to sound dickish to some people, like only 2. He did 2 tours of combat. Well, when you say you have 20 deployments 2's a drastically different number. And that was the one we decided to start with because to me, it was the most atrocious, but there's plenty left to cover.
And is that going to happen?
Yeah.
Is it worth doing?
Yes. And I will say, unfortunately, there will be more episodes because if people, you would have to watch the episode, and this goes back to, a little bit something you'd mentioned earlier. The way we did those episodes was important to me. We don't go out there, tell them what massive liars they are. We don't call them, POSs. We don't take it down to like a personal level and become unprofessional with it. We try to just state the facts, make sure that it's an airtight case to what we're saying. And trust me, we wouldn't say it unless we talk to several people on the ground because you're putting yourself out there. You come out publicly against a big figure like Rob O'Neill and Tim Kennedy. You better be right. Mm-hmm. And I know for a fact everything I said was right because multiple teammates always corroborated it. Not a single teammate ever said, well, that's kind of true. And we're not even talking like small exaggerations. So many were like, he said what? That never even happened. Mm-hmm. And I told him at the end of that podcast that, hey, everyone makes mistakes. I've made mistakes. Don't think for a second that, I'm up on some soapbox. Make sure your mistakes are different than mine, but I'm not perfect. This can stop like right now. Come clean. Say, man, I messed up. Start with you do try to do good things. That's debatable. And actually we can talk about that, a little bit later, but you're saying you try to do good things. Get a clean sheet. Go forward with a clean sheet, doing good things. Just come out and
set the record straight.
And he didn't do that. He doubled down, and so now we have more episodes coming out.
Gotcha. Is that a consequence?
I don't want to say it's a consequence because I would rather. This is me being a little naive because we just talked about it a little bit. I would rather be known for all the positive stories that we've done. We did an episode where an American warship got bombed by the Israelis and killed Americans in the Gulf. Almost nobody.
I didn't know about it.
Knows that story.
I didn't know until I listened.
Those veterans just want to hear their story. That was a huge episode that people should want to hear. It doesn't get a fraction of the views.
Distraction, yeah.
I'd rather give Tim Kennedy an option to set records straight, come clean, and go back to doing episodes that I want to do.
This is interesting because that's one of the things I respect the most, I think, about the show. And it sort of dawned on me really right away is that what you guys have done is you bring in those types of stories. And it's always a bit of a history lesson too. So I've learned actually a lot about history that I didn't know. You guys have uncovered quite a few things. But I think what it does is it shows that you are willing to bring on. There's been some sort of obscure people, like people that do not have massive social media followings or whatever. And I think it's a really solid balance. I've actually tried to do the same on the show. Like I want to talk to the people that I want to talk to. Yeah. That I have questions that I'm curious about. And I'm, as I've already probably overdone this one, I'm super grateful that people actually want to do that. And in the beginning of this whole thing for me, I was just like, man, these are awesome conversations that you won't get to have otherwise. I wonder if people would be interested in hearing these publicly, which is why I started putting it out. And it wasn't about like, let me get this famous guest over here, this person that has this following or wrote a book, did a movie, did whatever else. If those things come up and those things happen, that's great. But that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because there's some value I think they can bring to, people that want to be a fly on the wall for a cool conversation and maybe learn some things.
There's plenty of exceptions to this rule. But most of the big names, don't have the best stories. They became a big name, however they became a big name. And let's take this for example. And this isn't a hit on him at all. Someone's going to take this and clip it. Sean Ryan, mm-hmm. Big name. Mm-hmm. Probably not as far as his story. Yes, it's a unique story because of the podcast aspect of it. But just take, his fairly short military career, worked as a contractor for a little bit. And now he's a big podcaster. We'll take the famous element out. Like, what's his real story as far as, a white side seal and a contractor. It's not that special of a story. That's not a hit on Sean. The point is, I can go take a guy from Miami SWAT right now that you've never heard of that just retired, and he can tell you some crazy stories that most people haven't seen. But no one's going to want to, and I want to hear a story, but It's not going to get the clicks and the views because it doesn't have the name attached to it. I invited people not based on their name and the hopefully the clicks and views and association will get, clearly based on their story.
Yes, same. And I respect that. And I think that's what I picked up. And so that's why I didn't think it was ingenuous when you were kind of putting out some of these episodes, or disingenuous, sorry. That's the word I was looking for there. When you're putting out these episodes, and I get how people would respond differently to that. And so this kind of brings it to the community piece. And then I want to get into a little bit of your story, which I've heard you tell before. And I promise I won't have you rehash the entire thing. But I guess pulling it together is just there's kind of a, I don't know. I say the word it's not disingenuous. And so what's the opposite of that? What is it? And again, I think that this word gets used a lot and people will say it's cliched, but to me it is authentic in a way. It's two dudes talking. They come from different backgrounds. They're genuinely curious. They have an opinion. They have a take. And the take is a good take, which I think this is what people want. I mean, in the immortal words of whatever his name is, I can't remember whatever it is. It's like, have a take and don't suck. And it does, and it never has. It never has for me. And so, I mean, I probably have 6, podcasts that are in my library or menu that I listen to fairly regularly, and the one that I listen to the most is you guys because of the reasons you just said, because that's what I pulled out of it. And then again, going back to TTPOA, I'm like, I really want to meet this guy, like, because I want to know who this person is. And this is another piece of it I think what I was trying to get to is I think people want to know where those who the person is that's delivering the message. And to your point with regard to Sean Ryan, I think some of that stuff about his stories has just recently come out, and it hasn't necessarily been positive stuff. And I think he's talked about it a little bit. I don't know. Yeah. I don't pay that close attention to that, to be honest. But that said, like, what are we really doing here? Is this investigative journalism? Is it, what is it? And so that's the question I guess I have. Like, what is it?
Well, right off the bat, to give credit's due, the negative things out there about Sean Ryan are out there. And guess what? He said it and he owned it.
Correct.
So you have no issues. How could you?
Right.
You beat a guy because he's down, because he was willing to air out his own dirty laundry.
Shortcomings,
yeah. I mean, he came out and said it, and I have a lot of respect for him.
Sure.
For doing that. And when he came out and said it, he had a lot to lose.
Tons. There's a lot of liability there, man.
It's much easier to come out and be honest when you're small and no one knows you.
Sure.
So a lot of respect to Sean for doing that. So it can be done. The investigative part of it stems from this, and we get requests all the time. Hey, look into this guy, look into this guy, look into that guy. And there's plenty of people that probably should
have a closer look.
Have a closer look. But we're one. That's not our identity. It's something we'll do if it warrants it. And so here's what warrants it? And for us, and right now, we've always said, if you've traded in your integrity for money and fame in the veteran community, that's a line. You've crossed the line. It's not exaggerating, a few stories. I was there, killed 3 guys, I killed 5 guys, really killed 3. You're not showing up on the Antihero podcast over that.
Sure.
Like, it has to be like, truly, you have intentionally cashed in your integrity for money and fame. And the thing is, one, the only people who can call out vets are vets. Like, I believe that. And I'm also passionate about that because why is it important to keep, to have some sort of accountability in the veteran community? I believe this. Veterans are still held with high respect in this country. And I hope to never lose that. Politicians have lost that because politicians never held each other accountable. Police have. because police have not held each other accountable. Now, does that mean I think all police are bad?
No,
Absolutely not.
No, right.
But so much majority. But that's the reason why that perception is there.
Exists, yes.
Because they didn't hold each other to a high enough standards, and now they're suffering the consequences of that. And that's just the truth. And I won't let that happen to veteran communities if I can stop that. But someone has to say something at some point, and that's what we did. And we got a lot of backlash of the veterans tearing down other veterans. Right. Oh, you're just jealous because he's famous. And we've had a lot of positive feedback from it. Almost everyone in the veteran community loves what we do. I get very, very little pushback from the veteran community. The civilian community is where still mostly positive, but that's where if I had to put a percentage, got to make it up. Like 95% of the veterans are like, "Thank you so much. You're absolutely right." I've always known that. I mean, a lot of things we're saying aren't even a surprise to veterans, and the civilian community might be more like, I don't know, 80-20, 70-30.
Because they like a good story, and you've exposed their hero.
And they're more upset. They're more upset at me for exposing their lies.
Easy target.
Than they are at the liar.
Yeah,
like that's crazy to me.
Easy target. I don't know where that stems from, man. I think some of it is, I don't know where it's rooted. I really don't. I understand, I think a little bit of it, but I think it's people looking for something to hold on to, like an example or a heroic story, because they're not exposed to a lot of that. They didn't grow up around it. They're searching for meaning somewhere, and they feel like these are meaningful things, and they're trying to emulate things in one way or another. I should have done this, I could have done that, those type of things. But to hold on to it so tightly and have it show up emotionally like that is a little weird to me. And they'll go to the grave.
They will.
They'll go all the way to the end.
It's so bad. You'll see some of the comments like, "Oh, this is a he said, she said thing." Like, "Oh, like Tim was there, so how can I believe you?" Because it's sometimes it's hard to get special operations guys to come into the drama. It is. I get that. And so then we had 3 of his teammates come on the podcast because Tim didn't own up to it, and when he didn't, his teammates were finally like, "You know what? I can't believe he didn't own up to it after everything you said was true."
I think it went a little deeper than that, though, man, because I think one of those guys called him out. Travis called him out, right?
Yeah.
And there was a meeting, there was a one-on-one,
right,
face-to-face, said he was going to do some things.
Oh, he did Travis wrong.
And then turned the table.
He made Travis look bad because Travis did the right thing. And Travis was the ground force commander of the whole convoy, which is the whole chapter of the book, or 2 chapters of the book we talk about. And I talked to Travis for hours and hours. I talked to all these guys for hours. I asked them the same exact questions because, it has to be right. And I also thought, if anyone might come against me, like legally, it'll probably be Tim Kennedy. So I can't give him like
an inch.
It has to be right. And there are things we left out of the episode because
you weren't quite sure.
We were 95% sure, and it happened a while ago. So some of the guys were like, "I think it happened this way. I think this happened."
Fair enough.
So if I don't know, and not just if I don't know, and it's not dual sourced by 2 of you being 100% about it, we can't take the chance. And Travis like, "You know what? I'm going to go to Tim about this," because Travis had never read the book. None of these guys ever read his book. That's the problem. And when I told him what Tim had written in the book, they're in disbelief. Like, this is crazy. And he called his ground force commander basically a pussy and a bitch, right, and called him fat. And, said he was, scared to do the right thing. In the book. Right. Said he was scared to do the right thing in war. Never even happened. Tim Kennedy was the lowest ranking guy, like, on the convoy. And to think that he's going to go to the ground force commander and dress him down like that, comical. And he just made it up. He completely made it up to make him look like a badass in the book. And when Travis found that out, he wasn't too happy about it. And but Travis like, "You know what? I'm gonna go straight to Tim, man to man. I'm gonna go straight to Tim." And he let me know, he's like, "Hey, Tim's gonna come out here. He's gonna do an apology video, and he said he's gonna make up for it." I got to generalize this. I don't remember the exact details, but basically, it's like he's gonna come out. He's gonna correct the record. And he's going to promote my shooting school
Sure.
because he's that sorry about
That's what I remember him saying. Yep.
And then when Tim released the video,
none of that was in there.
None of that was in there. And anything that they did talk about at the convoy with no context of him correcting the record and saying sorry, it looked like Travis was agreeing with him. It was really, really dirty of what he did. And that's when Travis was like, okay, try to do the right thing. We're coming on the show. But that still had an effect because now they just on the show because people getting opinions before they know everything. Like, oh, I can't trust Travis. He was just with Tim Kennedy. Like that guy's just looking for fame or that guy's playing both sides because they didn't watch the episode and hear the story.
Right, they saw a clip.
They saw a clip and they don't know how dirty it was that Tim did him.
Yeah, so I have to be honest. So, well, first off, I think that you guys brought new meaning to the word or to the term bringing receipts. And I think that's exactly, I mean, I don't think you could really describe it any better. There are a couple things came up for me in that. One, I actually think that episode was more meaningful than the actual episode that you did, just the two of you guys.
Yeah.
Because those guys, so the second thing in that for me was you've got guys that have just did the thing. It did it in the way that they did it. And when I talk to other members of the special operations community, I have some very close friends that have done that.
Yeah.
Did that for a long time, been in a lot of places that have a lot of, let's just say they have a lot of feelings about people writing stories or books or movies or things like that and writing things like the beret or the trident or whatever the thing is. Because in their minds, and this is truth, there were 12 other guys, 16 other guys there. It's not just your story. It's these other guys' story, and it was their story too.
Right.
That was, let's just say, not told the way it could have been told or should have been told. And they weren't telling it, and they weren't going to tell it. These are guys that just went on as quiet professionals, which is what they intended on doing. And now they're kind of thrust into this thing being called out publicly after being a quiet professional that had to come to that. And so the things that I can't relate to that, to what it was like to maybe be in that situation, not their particular situation, but having been someplace with a guy who's now famous for whatever the reasons he's famous for, knowing all the things, that kind of go on and how only bits and pieces may have been told. Maybe they've been embellished, maybe they haven't, and they're making money. So that's going to be one of the things people are going to come out. You're jealous because they're making money, right? And you're not doing that. Second thing is they've got a personality, know how to run a business and, whatever. And they have some funding from somebody who's come to the table and wants to produce their story. And, again, it's probably jealousness. But I think there's also anger in there just with this is not why I signed up, right? This is not why I did the thing. That was not the feelings that I had. And it's being portrayed in a way that is perverted, kind of in a way. And it tarnishes whatever it is, the beret or the trident in a sense.
A couple things of that. That's a good takeout. I've never really thought about it like that. Like when one person writes a book, like you did it as a team. Did everyone say you could write that book? Mm-hmm. Is everyone profiting, from that book? And I don't have a problem with people profiting off of it. You know what I mean? Like more people did the work and their names are associated with it, but one person gets to tell the story and make the money. I don't know. It's an interesting topic, but I'll back up for a second. People, this might surprise people. I don't care if you write a book. I don't. I'm not mad at people profiting from their career. And some people do believe that. And you know what? That's fine too. I'm not mad at you for not doing it. Don't be mad at me
for doing it.
Now, it really starts to bifurcate with what's the story? What's the intent? And the intent will come through with how you write it. There's a book by Pete Blaber called The Men, Mission, and Me. He's a former Delta Force operator. No one's mad at Pete that I know of. I'm sure some of the hardcore guys are. But you know what? You go read that book. That book isn't about Pete. That book isn't about Pete at all. You can't help but read that book and be like, the only thing it does is talk about how great everyone else was around him. And it was a leadership book. So all the stories were all to get to his point on leadership and the things that he learned. So it's not just writing a book. I think it's the way you write a book. I think something that really surprised me as I was pulling on the strings on the Tim Kennedy episode was he used everybody's real name. Everybody's real name. And the more I talked to those guys, I was like, hey, did Tim call you and, say he was writing the book, use you for reference or, try to.
And they didn't even know the book.
Remember the story,
right.
Give you the heads up. Hey, I'm writing a book. You're in it. Just, do I have your permission? Ask for nobody's permission to use their name in the book, which I just find odd. And then, which I find way more odd than that, is if you're going to tell blatant lies, don't use their real names. That was a gift to me.
Right.
I was like, there's no way he's using their real names. He used all their real names, which made my job a lot easier. And that was just, that was unique to me.
Yeah. So it was to me too, when you guys brought it up, because I'd never thought of that. Again, like I said, I'd read the book. It never dawned on me that was the thing, but I'm pretty, I guess, aware of is that most guys don't want people to know for a lot of reasons, whatever the reasons are, but they want to live with some level of privacy and security, for maybe things that they did, maybe things that they didn't do. They don't want to be brought up. They want to move on.
So to me, I guess here's a workaround. I haven't really thought about it. So maybe I'd have a different thought if I thought more about it. But then there's no reason to use people's real names in the book for your book. So so they can stay private if they want to. Definitely make those phone calls. But to go back to what I was talking about, I think you should write a book. I think white side operations, Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Rangers, write a book. For the love of God, tell the truth. And let future Rangers and Green Beret and SEALs read books and have heroes. Like that's because if you don't read that, if you don't write that book, who they going to go to? So I don't mind that. I think the stories should be told, or else you're going to have a recruiting problem, or you're going to have an information gap where they may not want to go do something because they don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
No, the best recruiting thing that ever happened with John Wayne and the Green Berets. There was real Green Berets in that movie.
Right.
So I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's for everyone. I think it's a little bit different, at a tier 1 level because you were, you did do some things and say that, hey, like, I'm gonna keep this to myself. And even with that, I'm public and I'm out here, and it's a tightrope to walk to say, hey, like I actually can say a few things and know what to say, know what not to say. Hope that you don't say something stupid, on a live or on a recording that you didn't know you even said it until it's too late. It's I don't know. It's tough, but I don't think those guys that no one should write books. I just don't agree with that.
Yeah, so I'm with you on that. So, part of it is, and I've said this about law enforcement, particularly now, is there's somewhat of a law enforcement officers in general, particularly right now, with a lot of things that have happened in the last few years. But I don't think it's unique to that. I think it's kind of been like this for a long time. It's just kind of whatever that is, the thin blue line, if you want to call it that, or whatever. Is there's a bit of a diminished First Amendment right that you are not supposed to say things, and that's not like a rule, like a written rule, a hard written rule, but it's a cultural thing. And what does that mean?
It's 100% a cultural thing, and that's what makes it tough to know what's right, what's wrong. And here's another thing, and I see these in the comment section. Everyone was like, "Oh, I miss the days when you wouldn't see special operation guys on podcasts telling their story." It's because there weren't podcasts available. The founder of the Delta Force, Charlie Beckwith, wrote a book called Delta Force. Mm-hmm. So it's
read a book.
Yeah,
read a book.
That was called a very long version of a podcast. He absolutely did. He wrote a book. Get out of here with that. Like this, it's just But the culture, or maybe the rules or unwritten rules of sorts, are like the same old unwritten rules that really haven't kind of caught up with the times. Because now there's a lot more ways that someone can. It's easier and it's more accessible to get your story out there. It's why you're hearing more of them. And again, I don't think it's a bad thing, as long as the right person is doing it the right way. And speaking of Pete Blaber, he told this to me when I interviewed him, and he really got me thinking about it differently. Of like, why is, holding these guys accountable and making sure that we don't lie as vets, it's so important. He gave 2 reasons I didn't think of. He said, first off, we can't have young, aspiring Green Berets reading books thinking that you can carry 50 grenades in a backpack or on the battlefield, that you can throw grenades in and then follow a grenade in. You can't do that. The whole room is dusty as can be. That's a really good way to get shot. You can't have, a future Green Beret, thinking that you can hold off 400 Iranian freedom fighters. I don't even know what an Iranian freedom fighter is. With a hip firing your SR-25. Like these wild, getting into a near ambush, jumping out of a truck, and going around shooting people in the face at close distance, and chucking grenades into windows. That never happened. If you read this thing, that aggressiveness is what it takes to come out on top. When the truth is, that aggressiveness and that cowboyness is the way you get killed. If he'd have done anything that he said in that book, he'd have never made it alive out of Afghanistan. And that hit home to me because I read a bunch of books before I went to war. Because I didn't have the experience yet, so I wanted as much knowledge as I could. And then at some point, that knowledge, and it kind of it gives you a steeper, more advanced, kind of learning curve to learn more, because you're already exposed to more. And so when you see more, so it's important. It's important to read those books. But if those books aren't true, it's a major issue. So that's one thing. Hopefully I explained that right.
No, I think you put it together well. It's dangerous. It's dangerous, right?
The second thing is, when you tell a story so crazy like him, Tim said he was in a tower and killed 20 people in 24 hours, and in this tower.
Impressive.
So impressive. It's I can't even start.
Sorry.
I'm trying to.
Sorry,
don't egg me to not be professional, because it could.
I'm not. I promise you, I wouldn't push the bear or poke the bear too much today.
I'm just kidding. And the problem is, when you hear a real Green Beret go up there and be like, for 24 hours, I sat there and I was patient, and I got 2 kills, and someone's gonna hear that and be like, "Cool story, bro."
Yeah.
Like, what? Tim got 20 kills in the tower.
You gotta put to 10x on there, man.
Right, because now the real stories aren't impressive to anyone, because they hear these huge lies, and they're like, "Oh, that's impressive." And now real stories are impressive because you can't meet the expectations of what these grandiose tales have laid out there. That's a problem.
I think it is too. I mean, they're very good points. I've actually heard you bring up a couple of those before, on some of your shows, and I hadn't thought about that either. And again, given my background, I mean, those are good tales. Those are good tall tales, or tales to tell. It just so happens they're tall tales, and they're very, very stretched in a lot of ways. And I don't have any frame of reference for that. So it's exciting, right? It gets the juices going, and man, what a hero. How brave.
Right.
This is what we want of our service people. That's the guy you want on the front line, kind of thing. This must be what they're all like. And then I think this is part of, again, going back to why the civilian community is so distraught. Maybe
some of them
the
are.
Right word for it, is because you've taken their reality that was portrayed, and you've basically peeled back the curtain and shown and told what it really is.
And the irony of all of it, which I said before, is the guy was a UFC fighter, a good one.
Oh, man.
And he was a Green Beret, and he did deploy to combat twice, one to Iraq and one to Afghanistan. And the truth was good enough. The truth should have been good enough. But, some people just, I'm sure, because I haven't talked about his Iraq trip yet, and I've already exposed how his Afghanistan trip wasn't, the Wild West crazy. I'm always in danger, and it's aggressiveness and violence ruled the day, and that's why I'm here today. It didn't line up with what he wanted, so he created a story to make it line up with what he wanted. Iraq isn't any different, and because the truth wasn't good enough to him, he rewrote history.
Yeah, it's
and to some degree, he's paying the price a little bit for it. He wasn't at SHOT Show this year.
Mm.
He wasn't at Range Day.
Mm.
He won't be at the Green Beret reunion this year. So, he's up in DC right now. Where I don't know, maybe DC for someone who isn't always telling the truth is
perfect place.
It's the place he feels more comfortable at.
Perfect place. I have nothing bad.
That's opinion based.
I have nothing good or bad to say. I read the book. I heard the podcasts in plural, right? And the people. I've got my own opinions on that stuff. But I think the larger word that comes to mind is disappointment, and just kind of how it got out there, and it was left unchecked for as long as it was left unchecked, which I have to say, and I'm not blaming anybody, I'm a little disappointed other people haven't come out to say anything now since you guys have done that.
Yeah.
And this is my personal thing. This is how I feel, and that's on me and whatever. And, I'm just a dude. So does that even matter? It will matter to me, right? And I guess that's why I'm saying it, in that I'm surprised it took so long for other folks to come out and publicly say it. And you and Tyler really created a platform for people to feel comfortable to say things like, finally somebody's saying that has a platform that isn't the other guy that you mentioned that has had him on his show.
Right.
We've almost it's almost like you gave him permission it's almost like they got permission to finally say the things that have been bottled up for a while. And I thought that was really interesting, is that in a way you gave people a voice that should have had a voice at some level, because some of these guys that have come out have said, I was there, man.
Yeah.
Outside of the guys that were on your show.
Right. That one, I'm glad you brought up that point. Even when you think you're in the right and you're, about to, drop this podcast, you have massive concerns of, you lament over it, like how you're going to present the case. And you almost feel like you're an attorney, about to, have your biggest trial,
Right.
I have to lay this out to where, veterans understand it and civilians understand it, and they understand why this is a big deal. I have to make sure that everything I'm saying is right. And then when you finally get done recording that video, you're a little bit nervous and you're like, I hope I did it right. You're always going to look back on it and be like, I wish I'd have said that a little different. I wish, nothing's ever perfect, and you wanted it to be perfect. And then you release it and you don't know how anyone's going to, accept it. And then for other veteran podcasters to take that and back us up and be like, because I didn't know. Like, no one, here's a comment for a best-selling book. I don't know who read that book. No one in the veteran community did. No one ever liked him for whatever reason. And that's not a podcast. Like, no one really had real specific reasons. Like, if they did, they were more like personality things, right? And when we finally did the research, someone finally read the book. Someone finally listened to I listened to every podcast he did on research. And now they're validated. Like, I knew I didn't like this guy, but now I know why. The whole veteran podcast community really came back and backed us up, which was great. Valhalla VFT, Green Beret Chronicles, and in a weird way, both Green Berets, both with a decent outreach, especially in their community, they could have easily said, no,
we're not going to touch this.
We're not going to touch this. Don't you bring down. That's right. We're going to, even though
we got to protect our guys.
In fact, Valhalla has actually defended Tim Kennedy in the past. But we have to protect the brand. Because in a weird way, I get that. Like, you do have to protect the brand in a little bit. And I know that's going to sound maybe
it's like being a Raiders fan, man.
Yeah. And I know that's going to sound a little bit like, two-faced of me. Yes, you do protect the brand on petty stuff, and you keep things in-house that are in-house and that you can. But Tim's the one that went public, and now it's a public topic, and those guys really backed us up, and it made me feel good because it's not just us. Integrity mattered to other people in the community too.
Yeah, and they came out. They were definitely voicing that. I've seen quite a bit of it, and I try to pay attention. I don't get too deep into it. Like I don't go to bed thinking about it, this stuff at night. But when I see it, I pay attention. I listen to it. There's another end of this though. There's the other side of it, and that's the civilian community, or maybe even some from the veteran community that are still standing tall behind the book or behind anything he said or whatnot. And they've even gone so far as to make accusations against you specifically and Tyler, just the show in general, I guess, about you guys not being supportive of veterans and actually hating the veteran community. And backing it up with the name of the podcast. This is what they're trying to do. They're just trying to tear people down. How does that make you feel?
That's people. I'm sure you've told this to people. I'm sure you've heard this. Don't go to the comment section. Don't go to your own comment section. Don't do it. And every now and again I do, and like that's the one that gets me. That one really gets me. We're not just veterans tearing down other veterans arbitrarily. Like how messed up would that be? Like really, like how absolutely devious would you have to do to be like, you know what? I want to get bigger and more famous, and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to randomly attack good people and drag them down.
That would be as egregious as some of the tall tales that were told in the book.
Exactly. And for us to do so much research and to back up everything we've said with teammates that were there and be 100% correct and be very vocal about it to say, hey, the truth matters, integrity matters. We're doing this for the right reasons. I'm going to be professional about this. I'm not going to call people names. And to still get like that type of reply to it, I don't know, those sting. Just be honest with you.
Sure.
Those sting. I'd love to see him be like, I don't. Lions don't care about the opinion of sheep, but they do. They sting a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to transition into kind of the things behind the podcast, because people get into the podcast, they get the drops once a week, on Monday, and then maybe they're going to the live stuff that you guys are doing on YouTube and so forth, and that's what they get.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, right, in every podcast, I like to hope that people are not doing this and fast forwarding through those things. You guys do a pretty good job actually of doing a good deal of it organically.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's important for the people that support the show, because these things don't happen without support. The point being that First Responder Coffee and Cigar Company, and that's where it really started. Right? That's where it really started, and that was, it's everything opposite of what you were just saying in terms of not being supportive. So let's talk about that, man, and kind of the origin story of that, and some of the things you had been doing long before the podcast was ever even a thing.
That's a great segue. I will for a second. Sometimes you have to, in order to defend yourself, like you can't keep everything in secret. Like you have to
talk about yourself.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you to do.
Yeah, talk about yourself.
And it'll always feel awkward, But to say that, that's the type of person you are, like a veteran that'll tear down a veteran community, from a guy who signed up after 9/11, zero intentions to go into the military, will sign up for 9/11, serve his country for 20 years, go through every level of special operations all the way to the top, take a bullet for his country, take a grenade to the face for his country, and then get out and train SWAT teams for free, and realize that there's a massive need to support first responders, and we'll start a business of coffee and cigars where we've given away more money than I've earned in my own business, because the money I've earned in my own business in 2 years has been zero, and I still go out and train people for free. We gave out $25,000 last year, and to say that's the type of guy that'll tear down a veteran just for money and fame, you have no idea what you're talking about. And there's another thing I don't talk about a whole lot, but if you pay attention, it's out there. By the way, in between all of that, still works for the Sentinel Foundation, a nonprofit to rescue kids around the world. Okay. That's a shitty thing to say about me. You have no idea who I am.
Yeah, you've done no research, not looked into this. Again, then going back to my initial meeting with you, that's what I wanted to get, because you get the forward-facing show, and that's what it is, right? And again, I'll say it again. I think it's very genuine and authentic. Again, people will be like, everybody says that about everything. It's kind of cliched. I don't think that at all in this case. And I wanted to meet the guy behind the thing, and is this guy the same guy, and whatnot. So talk about the company, man. Talk about FRCC.
Yeah. We actually
promote the product, man. That's what I'm.
A little of the backstory is, ironically enough, is going to give free training to a SWAT team, and I was actually doing it with a guy from DevGru. And we were going to start and then he did start a nonprofit that was going to give free training to law enforcement. And that was, at the time, we were going to hope to do it by raising money and then like reimbursing us for it. But at the time, we're like, hey, as of right now, if they want the training, we'll do it on our own dime. And that's what we went out and did. I always wanted to create I knew I was going to start some sort of business.
Okay.
I really wanted to do that. I knew that I was ruined and I could pretty much only work for myself, and no one would really want me working for them.
It's good to know yourself.
And at some point I was like, hey, nonprofit work is tough, especially even on the Sentinel side. At the end of the day, you can be as sold on your cause as you want, but in order to get that, nothing happens without money. And there's really only one way for nonprofits to get money. You want to take a stab at it?
You got to go out and ask for it.
You got to go ask people for money.
It's so awkward.
You know how hard that is.
I do, man. I absolutely do. I was in a situation. So I'm a gym owner in the state of California, man. And during we expanded a business 3 years before. We ran into a lot of issues with the city. Had the rug pulled out from under our feet. It was a very dysfunctional, I'll just say institution and organization. Found myself, my partner and I, CC, are very planned, in all of this. And we had already been in business for 7 years. We were doing we were doing all the right things. And then the rug gets pulled out from me. You're feeling like, shit, man, I'm not going to have enough money to do this. And I'm going to be in the red instead of 2 years, which I knew I was going to be, right? Yeah. So this is going to be 3 years, right? And then, right? Then COVID happens, right? And living in that state, we got shut down for a year, right when we were coming over those 3 years into this expansion, right? And so I had to do it again. I had to go out and ask for money. It's the weirdest thing in the world, man, because the whole thing had been bootstrapped. We'd always done it on our own. So I do know, is what I'm saying.
I don't believe any good man ever feels good about asking someone else for money.
Some people are really good at it. They love doing it.
Yeah, and good on them, especially good on them. But I just wasn't wired like that, and so I had this idea. I was like, hey, what if we did this? What if we started a business and we used the profits from the business to do what we want? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have to go around asking people for money, or not do it as often, because we have a source of income coming in. It ended up kind of getting like, what would we do? And I was like, man, coming from the military community, you have Black Rifle Coffee.
They did it.
And when they did it, everyone was like, coffee's for Starbucks and left companies. Like it'll never go away. It'll never work.
This is going to go away.
Yeah. Yep. And look at them. Like they're huge, and I love that. But they really they're unapologetically veteran, and there's no one like that in the first responder community. And so I was like, we can recreate this, and if you can recreate it half as good as them,
the model works, right?
We could really do a lot of good through that. And so they ended up, just, I think, not taking it as serious. And I probably wasn't that serious at the time. To be honest with you, I was just throwing things against the wall. Well, I couldn't shake this feeling, and I thought about it. And I ended up writing a business plan for it, and I actually thought the business plan was going to talk me out of it. It's like, this is why I'm not going to do this. Yeah. And so, long story short, we ended up launching the company with that same goal in mind. And we started donating, giving away things, trying to immediately be who we said we were going to be. And we ended up getting way more requests, even at our little level than we could ever fulfill. And maybe a year and a half ago, we had this meeting and we're like, hey, we're going to have to do something. How are we going to try to be a bigger impact in this community? This is, of course, we thought about expanding our coffee line. I don't know if just another bag or
another label.
Right. It's just going to increase our inventory. The sales might be there, but it's not we need to do something else. Let's do something else. We ended up coming up with Cigars, First Responder Cigar Company. We're we don't have to change the name. FRCC. Logo, let's go for it. And we started it out with just the Alpha cigar, our cigars in order: Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Delta Limited, and the Alpha just took off, which is just I'm really bad in business. I went all in coffee. Coffee went real slow. Had to hustle my ass off to get it where it is, but I kind of went all in on coffee, super slow, hustled to where it's something we're proud of now. We just dip our toes in the cigars and it takes off right away. And I'm like, I can't get it right. I can't get it right. That sounds about right. So we came out with the Bravo line. The Alphas are Habanos, they're a Nicaraguan, Cuban-seeded Nicaraguan cigar. Yep. And I love Maduros. So I really want to call them Maduro. We call them Maduro, and I assumed that the sales would kind of stay the same. I was hoping it would increase, but the Maduros would take away from the Habano sales a little bit, eat into it a little bit, and it really wouldn't be at double the sales.
Risky move.
We went for it. Just
took
off. And it just happened time and time again for us. And if you think about it, I think a little bit of classic masculinity is coming back. I think we lucked out into a timing thing where
most things are like that.
Where, of course, I know the whiskey and bourbon thing's a little bit played out. You could make that argument; it may not be wrong, but the next, there's just more cigar smokers, recently than that industry is growing. It's growing at a rapid rate. I don't know why they didn't grow together. It kind of delayed one to the other. And that was great. And it enabled us to grow our business, which enabled us to give back.
Keep doing the things.
Keep doing that we want to do. Yep. And so we've been really halfway lucky. And the last 2 years have been some of the hardest. Someone made a joke to me, and God, it's not even a joke. It's so true. Start your own business, and you'll never work so hard for as little money.
Yeah, exactly. And ask me how I know.
And I love it. And, and at the same day, project, don't get me wrong, I'm human, and there's days I'm like, oh God, is this worth it? Why don't I just get a government job and make 6 digits on top of my retirement and just live it, just live an easy life. But here we are.
No, I can appreciate that. Small business owner, man. I get it. Some nights you're just laying there staring at the ceiling at the end of the day, just going, what am I even doing?
And I don't want to discourage anyone from being a small business owner. There is light in this tunnel with a lot of reward to it. And I expect there to be a significant reward to all this hard work. But it doesn't come at the beginning. And thankfully, there's a lot of business owners that gave me that expectation management and be like, 2, 3, 5 years, as long as you're trending up, keep working. But at some time, you might have to pivot and be like, all right, well, not this one, shut down shop, and maybe the next one will go. But which is not to pivot too much. But you ever watch The Men Who Made America? It was a documentary on History Discovery Channel.
I don't think I saw it.
And it was great. It went from the railroad system, the golden age, the Gilded Age, to Hershey's chocolate, Post cereal. They just kind of went newer, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, McDonald's, KFC,
Ford,
Wendy's, Ford. And outside of the Gilded Age, where just old money was just,
the Rockefellers,
right?
Oil,
the Biltmores, Rockefellers. Most of those guys had started 3, 4, 5 failed business ventures,
starting over,
and they were absolutely, and they started this last business with their last dollar or last borrowed dollar.
They just went all in on them,
and they're like, all right, screw it. It's this or nothing, and they hit it. And I think we live in a world where, Amazon Prime has ruined us. If it ain't here in 2 days, and now 2 days is too long. Like, can I get it here next day? Can a drone drop it off now? Like, can I get my food in 30 seconds? My attention span is as quick as we have 30-second social media reels, and most people can't make it through 30 seconds where they're off to the next thing.
Right.
And it's really, I think, like programmed us to not have to put in the hard work and do like the long-term game, the long-term game that takes to be successful. And unfortunately, the hunger for success is still there, but it's not matching up.
The work ethic.
And now we have like a lot of disgruntled people that think the system is against us. No, you're doing
it to yourself, man.
You're doing it to yourself.
And you have to ask yourself, are you contributing to the problem with, the participation award type of mentality? Like, I showed up today, so this should work, or I should get paid.
Yeah.
I think it's a sickness, if I'm being honest. And I think that disease, for lack of a better term, is deeply rooted now after quite some time. And it's going to take some time to get out of that. And
I think if you roll that back even more, get on my soapbox.
Do it.
But roll that back even more. We have kids getting out of college that are getting into, 3-4 bedroom houses with 2-car garage, 3,000 square foot homes, because that's what they're accustomed to. And that's, they want to maintain that lifestyle. And there just isn't enough. I'm not saying everyone does that, but I don't see a lot of people generalizing. Gosh, I can see the comments already. But
grouchy old man.
Yeah, they're not, choose my words right, but suffering's a harsh word that I don't want to use. But they're not. They have it easy.
Yeah, they haven't had to sleep on a couch.
Right? They've never had to. Maybe suffer is the word. I'm looking for. I don't want to suffer their whole life. Yeah.
Yep.
Like, where's the hard times? Like, you have to have hard times, and if you don't have hard times, this is really what my point is. If you don't have hard times and you're having it kind of cush, it's because you're spending everything you make to ensure you're entertained.
Lifestyle.
They all have newer cars. They're staying in decent places at least. Probably at least agree on that. They're having Uber Eats deliver them their food. They're still eating, drinking Starbucks coffee. There is no sacrifice, but they want the reward at the end of that sacrifice. And that's not how it happens.
Well, they want it right now.
And if you're going to start a business, you have to be in a financial advantage. You cannot be living paycheck to paycheck and start a business. It will not work out. And I don't think a lot of people, they have that end goal in mind. They want to do that, but they didn't put the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of hard work, not driving a new car, not having the latest iPhone, to put themselves in a financial position to start a business where you're going to suffer again.
Something that's interesting, just kind of how we've been talking and looping back to what we were talking about before, and going back to the stories that have been told and people trying to find. There's an emptiness there, and they're trying to find something exciting and to latch onto. And like the business thing, again, the direct-to-consumer market now is wild. Yeah. And that instant gratification is wild. The participation award thing has led to a good deal of this. I think the thing, again, going back to the stories and the disappointment that people feel, regardless of how egregious something might be, the brand loyalty to something that's absolutely screwed them over.
Yeah.
There is a major disconnect there, and with that disconnect makes people, and again, I just say what you just said, I'm not saying this is everybody, but it makes them very easily preyed upon.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's kind of what
it does.
I think that's what we've gotten out of that story, and you're seeing these emotional responses to whether they want to realize it or not yet. They've been preyed upon.
Well, and we also have this, like these expectations of what businesses are supposed to look like. Heck, we can go back to what your house is supposed to look like. Go back to social media, and you get to see someone's, the room they just remodeled. You're like, oh, why don't we have that room? Like, why isn't it as nice as that? Oh, they just went on another vacation. Look her post all those pictures and how nice that is. Then they just go on vacation 6 months ago, and you start having this like this is what the good life looks like. And sometimes, and I've seen this time and time again, where you show up to someone's new business and they have a really nice place because this is like
supposed to look like.
This is what it's supposed to look like. No, that's what businesses look like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years later, like depending on the business. How about if it's a direct-to-consumer type, say you want to start a t-shirt company. How about run that out of your garage for about 3 years while you work another job to ensure when you add overhead of a new business, you're ready for that. And they will just make sure that they look the part and then I guess hope they become the part, and it will only crush you.
And I can relate to that. I was working for a very large fitness company for a very long time. It was pretty lucrative. Made a lot of money, had a lifestyle.
Yeah.
A couple cars, a couple houses, boat, all the cool stuff, right? Living probably beyond my means at some level, but still doing a good job and trying to be smart about it. Recognized this is not something I can continue from a job perspective, and recognizing that I was basically held by the short hairs. And then you realize, I got to get out of here, but this is going to be a 2-year process to get out of here and try and maintain.
Yeah.
Left that job with 2 weeks vacation pay, and a week's worth of sick pay, a few dollars in my bank account, and a lot of bills.
Right.
I wound up going to we're in the fitness business, personal training, personalized services. Wound up going to a trainer that used to work for me that left the company and had to rent space from that person, right? So I got nothing. I don't have equipment. I don't have anything, while also training clients out of my garage. This is with all that stuff, kid, wife, whole 9 yards. And then started, when I was finally able to get there, you'll find out you likely have to leverage yourself in some way and kind of put yourself out there. Rented a space at a time that was really volatile, from a market with people looking like, what are you doing trying to start? I'm talking like 08, 09.
Yeah.
What are you doing trying to start a business right now? I had 600 square foot room, right? That I could barely afford. And I knew if month 1 didn't happen the way it needed to happen and month 2 didn't happen the way that needed to happen, and organically it grew. So I can totally relate to that. And I get that. It's very frustrating. I have to bite my lip, right? And sometimes, and when I talk to people, are like, oh, when are you going to expand? When are you going to do this? I'm not, man.
Yeah.
Like, I am perfectly happy where I am. That's what I'm saying. Like, I drive a 2007 Chevy pickup truck. It's fine. Runs like a champ.
Yeah.
Right? I don't need another car in the garage, right?
Got a Dodge Ram with 150,000 miles.
It's got 140. Yeah.
It ain't going nowhere.
It's great.
It ain't going nowhere. And I say, I'll say this. I could have made money in this business. I said I haven't made $1. It's actually been, in full transparency, and it's something that should be talked about, though. I could have decided to make, however much that paycheck would have been. But I decided that, at some point for this business to grow, we need to redo all of our packaging. This packaging is not good enough for where we want to go. And it cost us $20,000 to redo all of our packaging. So I decided we're going to reinvest back into that.
Into the business.
Yep. And then we had a machine that took so long our K-Cup machine. It was taking, we had a guy on there it was too slow. And then I'm like, man, I got to buy a K-Cup machine. Or I could not have that massive expense and just be like, well, this is what we got. And buy a new K-Cup machine right off the bat. The cigar line. Opening up a new cigar line is not cheap. Packaging isn't cheap. The MOQs aren't cheap. And when it's growing, it sounds great when it's at the initial part of the cigar line growing. I lost money. I lost actually a ton. The word lost, give me a second. I didn't lose money in essence, but cigar sales are going like this. And if I sell one cigar, but I'm trying to keep up with the growth, and the one cigar I sold has to replace two cigars, or even 3, that math doesn't math.
Yeah.
So the only way to create your inventory is to take it from a paycheck, because the business isn't making enough money to support itself, the overhead, my employees, and the growth. So guess who doesn't get a paycheck? But it's it's not for nothing. It's a good problem, but it's still a problem, And so if you don't have the patience or the capability to reinvest into the business, then you'll be stuck there as well, and that's a problem. And that was a frustrating thing for me as a business owner, seeing our sales grow and hitting marks that I thought at this mark I should start making money, and then not having to go back through the books. But why am I making money? And be like, oh, it makes you feel better that, okay, I invested into it. But after 4, 5, 6 months of that, you get a little bit tired of that. You're like,
for
sure would like to see something from here, but and we're probably not there yet. But we have another big idea to put into FRCC to maintain that growth and put we have 2 legs of the business, coffee and cigars. We're gonna risk it again and start a 3rd leg to that company. And I don't know. That's at some point we'll say it's enough, but I don't know when.
I appreciate the transparency on that and the honesty, and that's why I wanted to dig into that, because I don't know how many people have heard that before. I don't know how much you've told that story before.
I don't think I ever have.
Okay, So cool. Our Insights exclusive. Winning today, right? But just to build kind of a background behind the guys behind the show and how we started, right? And then I wonder, because while all this is going on, we got this podcast going and we're doing all this research and putting all this work into to episodes and trying to have meaningful stories and guests to provide value to your audience. There's a production that goes on there with all that. I know the deal was you're not going to touch that, but I also know how that goes, and well, we need help over here and I need you for an extra episode and that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, the thing that you'd started the company to do in the first place is still going. I'd love to talk about that a little bit, just in terms of, you mentioned providing training to law enforcement, giving back, and also to the nonprofit organization. Mm-hmm. Talk about the training, the law enforcement training. Like, what is that? I mean, the training is a very broad term, right? You have you have a very special skill set. So I wonder how that mixes in. Yeah,
and I stay true to my wheelhouse. I don't never want to step outside that and look like a fool. So I know what I'm good at, and I know I'm not good at, and I know that not everything I did translates over into law enforcement.
And you're not a cop.
I was never in law enforcement. Right. Don't pretend to be. Don't pretend that I know exactly what you go through. But I do know this. I know gunfights are gunfights. There's a lot of it parallels. I'm not saying that there may be some lawsuit, things that they may have to worry about, but the tactics of gunfights are similar. And when it comes to SWAT teams, they're tasked to do hostage rescue. They're attached to do what we would call a high-value target, which is, or maybe a high-risk warrant that they would say. Taking down a building is taking down a building. Taking down a car is taking down a car. Taking down a linear object or a linear target like a bus is taking down a linear target. There are so many similarities. And when I go in to train them, it's usually hostage rescue, deliberate clearing, active shooter, barricaded shooter, things that I know have a very high crossover from what I did to what they do. And even with that, when I come in, I say, hey, I'm not telling you this is how you should do your job. This is how I did my job. And anything you can take from that, if I can make you 10% better, at the end of this, then good. I'll take 10% better. But I'm not trying to turn you into, a mini Delta Force.
Yeah, this isn't the way. This is a way.
Right. Now, I will tell you 2 things. I'm not just going to tell you a way and then move on. I'm going to tell you a way, but here's so much more important than a way. This is why we do it like this. And so many people at every level, it actually has nothing to do with law enforcement. Anyone in the tactical world, military or law enforcement, if you can't tell me why you do it as well, then you don't know enough about your job, and you won't be able to properly apply it to the next situation that seems 95% the same. So you're just going to go, okay, good here. That's very similar. I'm going to put it over there. But because you don't know the why, that 5% made all the difference in the world, and that's now not the answer. Like, we have to, guys have to know the whys behind everything they do.
So this brings up quite a few questions, actually. So first off, I would just ask, who are these guys, right, that you're training? Is it the patrol officer, or is the special teams guys? Who are these? Is it a combination of both?
Here's the other problem that I have. I don't have time, and I get a lot of requests to train. It's almost always SWAT teams. It doesn't have to be, but it almost always is. Well,
they're always the guys that get the most training, right? There's resource there. It's already budgeted for them to get it.
Right.
The time's generally budgeted.
Right. And again, and just complete transparency. Guys they'll reach out to me like, "Hey, how much do you charge for training?" And this is my answer to every single one of them: anywhere from $0 a day to $1,500 a day, and everywhere in between. That is what a tier 1 operator gets. I don't know if people are upset about numbers, maybe
anybody counting somebody else's money is an idiot.
Or maybe they're surprised that it's that low. Whatever it is, and sometimes I just cover my travel costs. And I say it like this for this reason: if you have no money, you have no resources. You clearly need the most help. And who am I to sit there and tell you, okay, I have this information. Sounds a little dramatic, but I've had phone calls before from guys I've trained that, like, if you didn't come out and tell me this, I would have done something different that night. And I think you saved my life. So I have this life-saving information. And if you don't, and I'm holding it for hostage, I'm holding it for ransom. If you don't pay him enough, I'm not going to give it to you. I know that's business, but that's how it feels. And it doesn't feel right. Doesn't sit well with me. I don't say it. I won't sit here and tell you I do it all the time, but I absolutely will go out for free and train SWAT teams. And when people hear those stories, there's a lot of word of mouth that goes on, and we get a lot of requests. And I do not have enough time to train as many requests as I get, but I'm more than happy and more than I wish I could do it more, but there's
bandwidth issues.
Yeah, it's a bandwidth issues, but I love every time I get to go out there and train with those guys.
Yeah, it's like you get to get back, which is why you started. And I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah. And in fact, again, I don't think I've ever told anyone this, because sometimes like this is when you can train. I have an opening, then let's do that. And it's 3 or 4 months out. Well, usually when what was a really open part of my calendar, I was like, yeah, I can make that happen. By the time I get there, I had something that filled up literally right to the day before. And as soon as I get back, now I have something afterwards. And now I have no downtime. And sometimes I get on a plane and I go out there a little frustrated going, and now I'm going to give free training or free training costs me money. Like if you didn't cover travel, like where do you think that comes from?
Expense, yeah.
Or if they just cover travel, now it's truly free training. And now I kind of show up with a bad attitude going, why do I do this to myself? Like,
that's more expensive, bro.
Why do I overextend myself? Yeah. And I show up with a bad attitude that I stuff deep down for the first 30 seconds I get there. And by the time I leave that place, I'm so happy I went. I'm like, why? I was like, you're such a bitch. Like you've done this before. Yeah. You know how fun it is to get there, hang out with the boys, talk tactics. They're always good dudes. It's always a good time. And I almost hate telling that story, but that's the reality of it.
You shouldn't hate telling it, man. I think people need to hear it. I mean, it's real. So, and I get that from you. You're super transparent and upfront about stuff. I'm glad you did, because I mean, I talked to there's a lot of, let's just look at like what we're just freshly into 2025, a lot of professional instructor friends that really struggled last year. Just economy, people's maybe taste or appetite for training, whether that dipped off a little bit, or whether they were looking for something different, or they were maybe spending a little bit more time. Give the consumer credit. Maybe they're spending a little bit more time being a little bit more discerning about where they're going, and not just choosing a class. They're doing a little bit more work, a little bit more practice before they're going to the next one or whatever that is. The point being, so many of my friends came, well, the class number needed to be, and this is I don't think people really understand this, like for a lot of these guys at the rates that they're charging for the training, whether it's civilians or law enforcement or whoever, you're not making, you're basically breaking even at somewhere around 8 students. Right? there's no gravy in any of that, and there's no profit in any of that by the time you go through all the things that you just said: the travel, the hotel, the food, the gas, the rental car, right? The ammo, right? The baggage fees, right? To get your stuff, and then all the time you have to spend going through, and then all the turmoil of going through TSA and dealing with that nonsense,
right?
And all that stuff to get there. Like you're at 8 students, you're probably right around breaking even, and so if 1 or 2 drop off of that, you're eating that, right? So that 12 student number is that sweet spot where at least I know I'm making enough profit, and this is a business that makes sense. But these guys were having a tough time filling a lot of that. And what they do is they reach out to the local agencies and they go, look, I have room for 4 more people so that I'm not diminishing the quality of, I'm going anyways.
Yeah.
And this is going to cost me money, right? But they're reaching out to the agencies to give the folks that they can a chance to come in because they won't get the funding or they won't get the time or whatever. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And to add to like that list of what you said about how expensive things get, people will look at what you charge and they're like, oh, it's a 2-day course. And they're like, oh, look how much money you make in 2 days. It's not a 2-day course. That's a 4-day course. It's 4 days of my time. I have to travel there the day before, and I usually have to travel the day after. And I can't set up, so I can't do 2-day courses in 1 week because they're 4-day courses.
Right.
I mean, unless the stars aligned.
Right.
So it's not that cut and dry. So much more goes into it.
Yeah, I think the comparison game is an evil bitch there too.
It is.
This guy charges this much, this guy charges that much, and somehow they've made a decision in their mind that this is the going market rate and this guy's out of line, right?
Yeah.
And I have some intimate knowledge of kind of how agencies work in terms of budgets, and it's never the same anywhere, right? So you're trying to work in, what do they have? What can I provide? There's a process to this that is very time consuming. Oftentimes to even just get it up through the channels to then have it come back to have to be renegotiated or whatever else.
The business side of training, which ironically enough, I don't want to be in. Like I
just want to do the
right. I don't want to be a trainer. Like I do it. I really do it as few times as I can a year. That's a weird way to say it. I do it as many times actually as I can
have the bandwidth
as I have the bandwidth for, which ends up kind of being a few times compared to trainers, like full-time guys that do that. But it's crazy to me, like small agencies that you think would have no budget, have a budget. Big teams have no budget, and neither one of those are true across the board.
Right.
It's like you really don't know what you're going to get to anyone that calls you. It's like different every time. Like some guys some departments have time to train, some don't. Some have a lot of time to train, some don't. But what I'm saying is, it's not specific. You would think bigger departments, more money,
not true.
More time to train, more resources. Yeah. It is different. Every time you pick up that phone.
Yeah, like I said, I've had some intimate experiences there, just kind of working through some things and learning a lot through that process. And also through that process, learning kind of what the gaps are. People are calling and they're asking for training. They think they need this. They pick this thing. I want this guy to come out and teach me this thing with the expectation that once they know the thing or whatever, they now know how to do it and they'll be good to go or whatever.
Oh,
yeah. So I wonder how you feel about that.
I'll tell you something.
Talk about the 5% piece, what they can take away.
That just reminded me of this for some reason. I think this doesn't happen very often, but it happens more often than it should. Sometimes, obviously, you get the people that really want to bring out a guy that was at the highest level, at Tier 1, Delta Force. I know a few things because I've seen a few things. All right, and I come out and they're more than willing to hear me and try to soak up as much information as they can. Every now and again, I feel like maybe I got called out there because the head instructor just wants me to validate his opinion.
Yeah.
And those are difficult ones, but that absolutely happens.
Yeah, so you're running into roadblocks, right?
Yeah,
when you get there.
Why'd you call me out here just to validate just to validate your stuff. And if we don't agree, sit here and argue with me about why.
Isn't that interesting?
About why that's actually not true. Their arguments, they're never really good arguments. Like it's not like a legal thing. Like I know now I'm going to sound a little bit like like an a-hole, but I don't know how to really make a good argument to that. But like in a weird, like nowhere else would someone at one level and this level, that's just being honest. Like that's not a dig on anyone, where they'd look up and be like, "Nah, you're wrong. Let me actually tell you like how it's done." And like those were just
it's comical, man. I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at you.
Yeah,
Hopefully, I'm laughing with you a little bit. Like,
I don't know. And I just said,
shaking your head.
Right? And I just said I didn't come out here to make you do everything. That and to do everything that I do.
But you called me, man.
But you called me, and I explained to you why this is clearly better, and you have no counter to that. That's all I want. I want logic and reasoning. If you don't, I actually don't want you to agree with everything I say, but if you don't, you have to explain why it's better. Like that's how the world works.
Right.
That's the world. That's the real world we live in. And if you can't provide that to me, what'd you bring me out here for?
I just had very similar conversation with Matt Pranka, who was recently on the show, and he calls that building castles around belief systems.
Okay.
And it's very hard for people when they're shown something, and they build those walls higher and higher and higher. And when you come to them and you go, man, we got to tear down this wall over here because it's not working. They just reinforce it.
Let me give an actual specific. A specific example. Actually, it won't be overly specific, but now I have something in real I can draw from. They basically were doing like a 3-step movement to enter the hallway that required 1 step, and I'm like, why are we doing? And on hostage rescue, where time matters. And they basically tried to explain to me like how this is better, and like we're not you guys, like we don't train as much as you do, so we can't use a 1-step system. We need a 3-step system to enter this hallway.
I don't know how that logic works out, but okay.
Right, and I said, what? If it's 1 step, you should actually sure
sounds more efficient.
That's right. You should absolutely for sure come down to this, because since you don't have as much time to train, you only have to train on 1 step to get out in this hallway. Yeah. It takes 3 times of the training to be efficient on that. So we don't do this because we're better. We don't do this because we get more time to train. We do this because it's more efficient. But in his mind, his argument is like, we're not at your level. We don't have that training. And it's an invalid argument. It's just about efficiency. And your argument makes no sense, but they will die on that hill. And I don't know why.
So again, going back to how that brings up lots of questions or lots of things for me. That is a gap, right? That is definitely a roadblock, I think, in the police training model, right? And so they're calling people in and they're arguing with them. Where they're not able to get people in is the other end of that, right? And they may be under-resourced or whatever the case. But beyond that, I guess the question is beyond that specific instance and that thing, what are the larger gaps that you're seeing that these guys have when you're showing up on scene, so to speak?
I bring that instance up. It's not. It's far.
Yeah, it's an anomaly.
I don't want to put that in the culture.
I got you.
But it happens more times than I would like.
Yeah, surprisingly, is what you're making.
Right, surprisingly, still very much on the low end. What's what do I think the biggest resource gap is?
What are the gaps? Just in terms of, I mean, there's skills, right? There's foundational stuff, and then they're trying to major in the margins. But yes, I mean, any gaps that you're seeing out there from a consistency perspective, and I bring this up for this reason, I think, just to maybe bring some context to it. There's a lot of excuses being made, for we can't do this because you just brought one of those.
I do see that a lot.
And it could be, we just don't have the hours that we can allocate to the training, or we don't have the ammo, or we don't have the gear, or I think there's a lot of things, and I think that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I see that.
What are the truths? What are the excuses?
That goes back to really it's as broad as the budget for training. Yeah, and the departments in big and small. I don't see necessarily a culture issue, tactical, law enforcement, tactical wide with things like that. Everything you said absolutely happens, but it happens here, doesn't happen there.
Right.
Happens here, doesn't happen there. I would say, but here's the one thing that I get across all law enforcement, and especially on the Antihero Podcast show, we're very law enforcement heavy. We break down law enforcement videos. We have a law enforcement guest on. It's not the culture of resources or a training mindset, although it can be, as the culture of leadership in law enforcement is just, generally speaking, bad.
Poor.
Bad. Cops that want to be cops and are proactive essentially get punished. The whatever you want to call it, the diversity movement is still deeply embedded. People who don't fight with authority, get promoted with anyone who dares question you. And don't get me wrong, I don't want you to constantly,
There's a time and a place.
There's a time and a place, but we have some really weak people that can never be questioned. Absolutely. Then you better have a good answer for it. Maybe that just really was a shitty plan and deserved to be, questioned. Goes all the way back to, no one wants to talk about politics, but politics and law enforcement are joined and are joined at the hip. And so, police chiefs are bowing down to whatever the mayor wants, and they're just not able to do their job. Long story short, go on and on and on. They just want to do their job. They just want to do their job, and they want the best person to be in charge of them. And they don't care if it's a black guy, a black girl, a white guy, a white girl.
Right.
They don't care who it is. They want the most competent person in charge of them. I think that's a pretty small ask.
I
they don't get it. And they don't get it. And that is really going to have some serious erosion to it, because the weak cops aren't going to be the ones who's leaving. They're thriving in this. It's the cops you want to show up
who are leaving.
Who are leaving.
The 8 to 15 year guys usually is about the average that I'm seeing. They're just like, you know what? I'm not really sure I want to do that. I don't want to take that promotion. I don't want to take that adjunct duty. Right. It's not a battle I want to fight.
And then besides that, the last thing that I hear a lot is it's district attorneys, DAs, not charging them, for doing all that, putting in the hard work, putting your life on the line to go through on a high risk warrant and get this bad guy, only for the DA to go, I'm not really going to charge him, or I'm not going to charge him to what they should be charged with, and they're right back out. I'm going to talk about just an erosion of morale. Like, we have to stop that. Like, DAs have, and then they wonder why the crime rate is what it is, and they want to blame the cops for some reason. The more and more I'm coming into this, I think there's so much power to be had at the DA level. So much. They can decide who goes to jail, who doesn't go to jail. They can put bad people right back on the streets. They really can control the crime right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. They do what they were taught to do, good or bad, right?
Yeah.
They do their job. This person goes to jail. They're charged with certain things, and then it's in the hands of the judicial system.
Yeah. And
what they do or don't do dictates what that cop ends up having to do every day on the street, and that directly impacts the citizens. And it's never the judge, it's never the judicial system that's being blamed for it. It goes straight to the cops.
Right.
I have a big problem with that. I live in the Silicon Valley, in the Bay Area, California. It's a different place. I get to travel a lot and see, and I've lived in different places, so I've seen how it is other places. It is different. Every place is. I'm not saying every place is the same, but I see consistencies. I have seen a little bit of change as of late because of the things that people are realizing at the citizen level and at the leadership level. We're starting to see a little bit of change. And I never like to talk about the problems without actually talking about solutions too. I think it's unproductive because what have we done? We've just bitched and griped and gossiped or wasted some time.
Right.
or we can be productive with it. So I want to get into that. And just with the, like a solutions-based process, I mean, it's a big problem. Obviously, these are big, complex issues. But what are the solutions for that? In terms of just going back to like the moral injuries that exist, with the things that we just said. You're doing your job, you're working your ass off, you're putting people in jail, and they're letting them back out. Or, you've got agencies that they're not promoting from within. And you already said, they're not promoting the hardworking, go get them type of cop. They're actually bringing chiefs in from some other place in the country to try and manage culture. And instead of managing it, it's like pigeon management, right? They come in, they shit all over everything, and then they flat out that they're gone, and they're not there to be held accountable or actually have to deal with the consequences of the things that they're doing. So again, that's a little bit of bitching and moaning, but that's the reality of what's happening. What's the solutions, man?
There's several levels to this, and I guess we'll start big to small. One is like citizens. Like you get what you vote for. Mm-hmm. If crime is really your biggest concern, then vote based on what that mayor is going to do, because of the culture that mayor puts in, or that governor puts in,
or doesn't,
right, is going to directly affect crime. And so don't bitch about crime when that wasn't what you voted for. Like that's straightforward. So the citizens have to care enough to vote for what they want to see implemented. And for whatever reason, that's just how it is. One party's tough on crime, and one party isn't. Say what you want to me about that. I'll prove you wrong 9 times out of 10, if not way higher than that. So and then oh, by the way, when someone is tough on crime, I don't know, support them. They may not get it right all the time, and that's the other problem. We have this culture of zero tolerance for mistakes. Cops are humans.
Yeah, man, we're not robots, man.
Right, yeah. You said you don't want robots.
Right.
So this is what you get. So you get humans who can make a mistake. So right off the bat, citizens. The second thing, and I don't think cops are going to necessarily want to hear this, and I understand it, good cops are going to have to get promoted. And when I say that, I didn't know this until I kind of got in this world, because in the military, like, you were going to promote every couple of years. You stand long enough, you're going to promote. If you want to be a patrol cop for 10 years, you'll be a patrol cop for 10 years. You don't have to be corporal. You want to retire corporal. You don't have to be sergeant. Stop complaining about the boss you work for when you never even tried out for the promotion. And I get that. The fun is at the street level, chasing bad guys. And I hate that, because if that's what you're doing, you're a proactive cop and you want to stay doing that job, that's the type of person we need doing that.
That's the one I want to show up to my mom's house.
That's right.
Calls 911.
But at some point, you're going to have to detach yourself from the fun, and say, you know what? I can create better change if I'm in charge of something. So stop complaining about leadership and become leadership. And that won't fix all the problems. I get it, but try it.
Yeah.
Try it.
Please. Yeah, for everybody's sake. Yeah. Right.
So the next guy doesn't have to complain about his boss, because it'll now be you. So I think that can be a conversation for a while. But I think those are 2 right off the bat.
I agree with you on both accounts. And the interesting part is those are the people, for me, like, again, as a citizen coming from that end of it, that should be the most influential. Yet it's not. It's that upper leadership that's been promoted up from people that weren't very influential at a lot of levels, either in doing the job, on the street, to maybe doing the job as an administrator who's now at a higher level administrator. They're the ones that seem to have the most influence and get most of the credit for not being, having good departments, when it really is rooted in the lower levels. I mentioned that, like, that 8 to 15 year cop who's trying to make some decisions right now. Is like, is this still really what I want to do, or do I want to be involved in being a change agent? Again, that's kind of a cliche term as well, but what can I do?
That's a good topic. I want to talk about that for just a second.
Go right ahead.
Here's another thing you can do. 1, be promoted. 2, quit complaining about everything.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not sitting here to tell you to, hey, just pretend everything's rosy and just, shut up and move on. Like, I get it. Like, I do. But I'll point to this, this study that was done. I think it's so important. So they essentially put, 10 cops into a room, and they had 3 real junior cops and 7 senior cops, and they were just going to give them a culture. The 3 junior cops didn't know that it was part of a study. The 7 senior ones did. And so they said, rate 1 from 10 to the senior cops, job satisfaction. And they're like, oh, it's a 2, it's a 3, it sucks, everything sucks. And all the way down, and the last 3 guys, their job satisfaction is like, it's a 3 or 4. I mean, it's a little bit fun because, I'm new to it, but they're right. Everything about this job sucks.
Yeah.
They did the same thing, the opposite. They flipped it 7, 8. I mean, it's not perfect. There's some things wrong with this job, but man, where else can you go and jump out of a car, get into a foot race, throw a bad guy on the ground, put him in cuffs, and protect the citizens.
Take him to jail. Yeah.
And when they get to the 3 new guys, guess what? They're like,
this is awesome.
Yeah, it's a 7 or an 8. It's an 8 or 9. Like, they were always a couple points higher or low, a couple points higher than the senior guys, but they set the baseline. I think that's so important. Stop complaining about everything that annoys you. Stop complaining about the way things were, because we can't change that by complaining. The new guys are looking at you. If you're always angry and upset and you tell them what a shitty job this is, that's now who they're going to become. You can absolutely dictate the morale at work. Please realize that and act accordingly.
Well, I think they are one way or another, because you're either doing it one of those 2 ways, right? So whether you think you aren't contributing, you are contributing. Right. And
you're contributing one way or another.
One way or another. And, what does that mean for everybody? And as a citizen, that's important to me, which brings up a larger conversation. We don't have to dig deep into this, but this is a thing that I've been on, because I've been, like, personally, it's kind of been like a personal mission. I want answers to this, like, because I'm having a tough time figuring it out. So I talked to all my cop buddies, and many of them are in leadership positions, senior to mid-level, but however the agency may be structured. My question really was, like, what does your agency value in your officers, right? And where are they putting priority in terms of those values? And then the next question is what do you value as a police officer, and what do you want other officers to value in their job or in their profession? And then the last question being is, like, what do our citizens value, and what do they expect in our job? And man, the answers that I were getting were basically, they're not answers. It's like, that's a really good question. I don't know if anybody's ever asked me that. And I'm like, that was mind blowing to me, to the extent, like, one of those guys, his senior leadership, went to his chief that day. Right. And he's like, hey, I got a question for you. He's got a good relationship with this guy. Apparently they worked on the same team together. Guy got promoted up. He's like, what do we value? And it goes straight to, well, crime rate's down, and we've got less of this going on in the city, and we're saving some money over here, which allows us to do these other things. But at no point did any of the basic skills, right, and needs, as it relates to those skills, get addressed in any of the answer.
Well, that's real, and especially when you put it to those 3 levels, because it should be very circular.
Yes,
either circular or
it goes directly back to the voting. Goes back to the voting and
absolutely
choosing officials.
They can't be separate, or they should. I'm sure they are. They shouldn't be separated. There should be a lot of
goals and values alignment are critical to having any kind of success in changing culture and crime rates. Right. If you want to look at it that way.
Here's one problem that could arise from that. Let me tell you, if they had to sit down there and tell you what their values are for their police officers, they now have to abide by that. And they will always say the right thing, people over equipment. Say it all the time. Do your policies really show people over equipment? I hear some stories that are wild to me. Like, I can't believe they made you go inside, or they did that on this. Like, and they're like, yeah, they're just for the optics. They didn't want to. Here's a good one. It was Christmas Eve, and they didn't want to call the SWAT team on this high risk warrant. So they just wanted to send a couple guys to get it, because the optics were much lower.
It doesn't sound like a good decision.
But any other day of the year, it would have warranted a SWAT team. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
For those few guys you sent, any other day of year, we've agreed that we would have sent these guys because it was a high-risk warrant. Because of the optics of Christmas Eve, this is what you're saying. It's okay for those to put those police officers at risk on Christmas Eve because of optics. That's insane to me.
Yeah.
So tell me your values, and then we're going to... But here's the other problem. Who's going to hold their feet to the fire on their values?
Exactly. There has to be accountability.
Right. So they're not going to do it because now they have to do it, or they just won't because no one's going to hold them accountable for it. And this line of thinking, again, this is the truth. And that's the exact type of line of thinking, and not just line of thinking, obvious things that are happening that brings down morale and police departments that we just ask them to say, hey, you're going to have to eat that and pretend like things are better. But you are,
Right.
At some point we can talk about it, and you should know, here's maybe, I'm not saying don't pretend like they're not there, but you have to know, I guess, better when and where and who you're going to vent to. It just can't be anywhere all the time in front of the new guys.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to go down that line of questioning with you just because, again, the Antihero Podcast is so pro law enforcement, but it's also very honest about it. I mean, you were talking about looking at the AAR situations and, the good things and the bad things and critiquing things. That's important. It's how you learn, right? It's not, you call it armchair quarterbacking, and there's probably some semantics that go on there, right, or whatever. Yeah. But it's important to look at the positive and the negative, weigh things, and so that you can be better and debrief on it or whatever, right, and getting outside opinions. And, I think people may get lost or maybe confused on maybe what the podcast and your messaging, and I say the podcast, but it's the message. It's really the people behind the podcast.
Yeah.
Right. And I haven't talked to Tyler. I don't know Tyler. Right. But I would ask him the same questions, and he would probably have a very similar, but yet different perspective because he's on the inside.
Yeah.
But I think that in terms of the messaging that's come across and the honesty and kind of where you guys are coming from in terms of, again, even something as simple as reviewing an AAR or having a podcast about somebody that wrote a biography that was full of, tall tales or whatever else. This is where it's coming from. And that's what I was hoping to get out.
We love telling positive. We do. We love telling positive stories. I wouldn't say even positive. True stories. True stories. And
pulling the positivity out of it.
Yeah, that's right. And that is an American hero, whether it's a firefighter, police officer, or a military veteran. But we also, like our Thursday night, I love the Thursday Night Lives. They're
fun.
Mondays, just professional, and it's a recorded podcast. Hopefully it's polished. Thursday, I'll eat. If I'm hungry, I'm going to eat pizza, where I'm going to drink beer.
Right.
We're going to break down videos. The chat, comment section is going to ask us questions, and it's so much fun. The chat section's got us in trouble a couple times by asking questions that we'll answer, and then those get turned into shorts, and that's like, ooh, that's not what, I didn't say that. I was answering a comment, but that's what makes it so fun.
Yeah.
But we'll break down videos, and usually sometimes it's, or just show, hey, this is a cop. This happened. Usually, hopefully it's recent. If not, but that was an amazing shot. Look at the way the cop handled that situation. That was awesome. Someone find him and and tell him he's awesome. And then we'll break down a video of not so great. And it hit me literally just last week when we exposed. I can't say exposed. We did a video of a cop who was watching porn while driving, didn't pay attention, rear ends another car. That car stopped because of a school bus. Thank God that car was there, or else that cop would have blown right through the school and probably ran over kids. He gets out. He goes to the car. He lies about it. He says, "Oh, my brakes locked up," and we basically
called him out,
or just whatever you want to call it. And everyone's happy about that. Like, oh, what a piece of crap! Like, good job saying this. Everyone is always so supportive when we show
the bad stuff.
when we show something bad that a cop did. We just did it to Tim Kennedy, but do it to a veteran. And it's wildly different. And I really don't understand the the reasoning behind that, man,
That's
take a stab at it. Veterans are held to a higher, or put on a pedestal, like a little bit more than cops. Although we say we put cops on a pedestal because they protect us and they're supposed to,
Yeah.
But
it's not really a pedestal. It's really like you're up there on the platform right now, waiting for you to fall down.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think they love to see cops fall because I don't know.
I don't know. It confirms the bias.
Yeah, it confirms the bias is what it is. It confirms the bias.
Yeah, it's an interesting play. And again, my reasoning for taking you down that line of questioning was really just to get both sides.
Yeah.
And maybe get a little bit, satisfy my own curiosity, maybe confirm a few things or validate a few things that aren't necessarily biased, but I had questions about that. What's behind the show? Because I think a lot of people go to the internet at the end of their long day or whatever for entertainment value or whatever, and they say they're looking for positive, but they're not. They're looking for something that's fantastic, or they can get involved. There's some momentum behind.
Sometimes I think they're just looking for people to. It goes back to training to just validate their opinions.
Right. Like
just agree with me. I like you, so I want your opinion to agree with me. When it doesn't, now they're upset about it. I'll give you a little bit of example for that. I'm not always on. We may not always see eye to eye, and there's a couple I can think of two right off the bat. Remember that the lady who threw the boiling hot water at an officer, and he killed her?
Yep.
People did not like my answer to that. They did not like my answer to that. My answer to that was, that cop is legally right. He protected himself from potential loss of eyesight and severe damage. And he's absolutely, allowed to do that. And she absolutely, if you slow down the video, tried to throw boiling hot water on him. I walked it back and said, however, I think he's morally wrong because he didn't have to put himself in that position. And he didn't do himself any favors by it looked like he was pressing something that may not have been there. But
pushing a button.
But legally, that's a justified shooting all day long. And people
don't like that.
Did not like that. But guess what? That's my opinion, and I get to have one.
Right.
And my gosh, like they just
roasted, flamed you.
And they're like, I used to respect you.
Really?
And we're like, this is just like, and they won't argue with me and tell me why I'm wrong. They just didn't like
your answer,
the other opinion. And I have to, in a weird way, I feel like I don't have to, but I have to justify my opinion and tell you the why behind it. But you don't do that in return to me.
Right.
Because I will go to those comment section. I've had some back and forth, but just go straight to name calling and kind of acting like the people you say you're not like. So yeah, that happens all. I bring up the other one, but it's like that all the time. But you know what? I'm here for it.
Well, words matter.
We can't ignore it. It happened. Yeah, we got to talk about it.
I agree. And I again, that's another thing I really respect about the podcast. We've talked about a couple of other things where people are not necessarily doing that, and other people that have. And I think people respect that. And they may not be public about their respect for that. And that's the interesting thing. You'll likely get way more hate, on stuff like that than you'll get like, no, he's totally right. People coming to your defense, on it.
No.
I think it's good that you do that. When it's warranted, there's a lot of shit that happens in comment sections, as you mentioned. But I think it's important. I think what I take away from that is you feel a responsibility to the message that you're putting out and how you're putting it out. And I don't think that's super common. And it comes back to the intention.
Here's it's similar, but not on the same level. The Breonna Taylor episode we did.
Yep.
We had the officer on the scene. John Mattingly, tell us exactly what happened. There's still plenty of people in the comment section saying, they were at the wrong house.
They were absolutely at the right house.
No, they weren't. They just want. If you guys haven't seen that episode, it's not one of our bigger episodes.
I shared actually that episode with more people than I shared any
favorite episode. Yeah. That one was crazy.
It was crazy that information was really just getting out there then.
Right.
After all the things that I'm like, go listen to the episode. I don't know what number it is, but people need to listen to that episode.
The problem is this. the misinformation doesn't have to wait. It can go out there so fast. And you even had people like LeBron James weighing in saying that they were at the wrong house. And there is absolutely no
validity to any of that.
Or that's what I'm looking for. Like, there's no repercussion to being wrong. The police department and the government have to be right, and they have to wait to know for a fact what happened. And so the misinformation gets way in front of the truth because the truth has to wait to know it's true. But by the time they put out their statement, it's too late. You know, the 24-hour news cycle's over. They're on to the next one. So
that is the fault of the government and the police agencies and whatnot for not telling people things. And it's okay to tell people things, I think. Even if you don't have all the information, you got to give them something.
Right.
And sometimes you will be right, and sometimes you will be wrong. And obviously what you want to do is be as right as you can all the time, but withholding it and waiting and letting that stuff get out there and spin wildly out of control, particularly in that instance, is dangerous. So dangerous that we were burning cities down over it. And they have to take personal responsibility for that, in my mind. And if they did that more, I really believe like that the times they were wrong, they could stand on like, but listen, guys, like here's all the other times we were right. And yes, we were wrong on this, and we're coming to the table to tell you that we were wrong. But and here's what the right information is. If they did that, I think it would avoid a lot of problems.
You want to go down that road? Here's a controversial, because I was even guilty of this. People on the left and the right seemed to kind of agree on this one. George Floyd. It's like, oh, Derek Chauvin, that was really messed up. Like, I'm sure even if you're on the right, you're like, that was really bad what he did. So like, we'll let this one go. No, Derek Chauvin's in jail. And he's an innocent man and should be released right now. And guess what? Until I did the research for that episode, I found out I was like, well, hold on, wait a minute, this is crazy. And without context or looking into it more, you'd be like, be careful about that. I can say it with confidence. Go watch our George Floyd episode. Derek Chauvin should be let out of jail right now. Our history episodes are my favorite ones. Waco, Ruby Ridge,
right?
Like those things. The history of SWAT. We have
another great episode.
We have such a large kind of like first responder audience. The history of SWAT's one of our least watched episodes. This is one of my favorite, and I don't get it. I learned so much doing that. I love the history of SWAT.
I had no idea. Philly or Chicago? Where does it start? Philly?
Started in Philly.
Yeah.
With the
that blew me away.
Yeah, with the lookout teams, which is really the history of SWAT. But modern day SWAT is really LA gets the credit. So it really kind of depends on how you want to define it.
Yeah, I hear you.
And everyone knows about the Texas Tower shooting, but no one really knows that how much it had an absolute huge significant in play in SWAT teams across the country. And it's so funny. I was here at SWAT show SHOT Show. And I do remember saying something like, it's so funny to me, LAPD SWAT, probably the most famous SWAT team in the world. Right?
Yep. There's a lot of lineage there.
What's the New York SWAT team called?
I have no idea, man.
Ever heard of them?
No.
Ever seen it?
No.
They're so it's ESU, and within the Emergency Service Unit, and within them, they have a team called the A Team.
They covered this in the podcast.
Which I don't know much about. And I was like, and I'm usually even though that's not my world, I'm usually a couple phone calls away from finding someone. And everyone's like, yeah, I kind of know about them. I don't know anyone. Don't have anyone to it. And those guys found me at SHOT Show.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. They found me at SHOT Show.
Thanks for bringing some credit to us.
And can I get a picture with you? I'm like, I want a picture with you guys.
That's great, man. Yeah.
And I was like, hey, here's my card. Want to come train? Hopefully, or even not just come. I'd love to go hang out with those guys. Yeah. And I don't know why but it's such a wild, different culture. No one even knows who those guys are, and probably do amazing things in the busiest city, night in and night out. And why they're not, rightfully so, probably they're just doing the Lord's work. That's all they want to do. Those guys are heroes.
Again, so going back to the show and the things that you guys are doing as we're wrapping up here, even though it's not getting a bazillion views and a bazillion clicks and whatever else, it is impacting people, right? I mean, it's hitting people that matter, right? And you're being acknowledged for it, which has got to feel good.
To have, and just to give the general term, to have a, New York City SWAT officer, come up to me, and talk to me, and have that experience, and hopefully get to go out there and train with those guys, or make them better, or just have that experience, means more than a million views does all day long.
Every day.
I don't need it. I really don't. For them to go, oh, aren't you doing the same thing? Like, you're just exposing him for fame. They don't know me. I could care less.
Clearly,
this is just a good time, and it's a way for me to tell other people's stories. If I wanted it about fame, we just sat here and told a lot more stories about me and my war stories, which we spent zero time on.
That's not what this is. It's not what this podcast has ever been about. I mean, I like a good story like anybody else. It's not why I sit down with people. Other people can have podcasts to do that stuff. Yeah. I do listen to those occasionally, and I get into them. And again, I read books, right? Yeah. I watch movies too. Maybe there'll be a movie on you someday.
Unfortunately, the truth just isn't that exciting.
Yeah, that's the interesting part about all this.
So now I've really painted myself into a corner.
Yeah. So let's just, if that's what it is, then that's what it is. That said, it's been exciting for me to sit down with you, man. I gotta be honest. Yeah, I don't. I always get a kick out of this. When people give me the time and the energy like you've given me today, especially like in a week like this. It was a lot. It was a lot to put it together. Just to get here. And I know you got a lot of stuff going on. You got to go hang out with your buddies tonight.
That's right.
And
got the Green Beret Foundation reunion coming up. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, how cool is that going to be?
I've never been to it, actually.
Oh, you've never been?
I've never been to it.
Really?
It's the first time going to it. I'm really looking forward to it.
Any idea how many people will be there?
No idea. I know nothing about it. To be honest with you, except just going in and seeing, and we'll see. I'll let you know.
Yeah, do that. Like I said, Brent, man, I appreciate you coming down. I love everything you guys are doing, what you're doing personally with the company. I really appreciate, like I said, the honesty and the integrity that you bring to the show and to the scene. It's something that I was searching for early in my journey, just in terms of learning and picking up information in places I was trying to get information from. And so I really respect it. And it's impacted me in a lot of different ways. Like I said, I've learned a ton from it. Very interesting takes. I would say 99% of them, I think are good ones.
Yeah.
Otherwise I might disagree with it. You might get a little disagree with, but that's pretty good in my book. I don't know what it would be. I have no idea how I could do this, but if there's anything I can do to help or support you guys on any of those levels, whether it's through the show, through FRCC, anything Tyler's doing or whatever else, man, anything I can do, make sure you just say the word, man. I'm happy to do it.
It's humbling, and I mean that. I appreciate it.
Thanks, brother.